Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for making the trek down to the soil tent at the other end of the field to come and join us this morning to talk about abattoirs. What better way to start the day than talking a bit about death? But this is obviously a super important topic, so I'm really pleased to be moderating this panel today. My name is Adele Jones. I'm Executive Director of an organisation called the Sustainable Food Trust. We're a small UK-based charity working to accelerate the transition to sustainable regenerative agriculture around the world. And of course, a really big part of that is the resilience of our food systems, and of course local food. And for us, a really key linchpin of having a decentralised, resilient local food system is having small-scale abattoirs. So it's something we as an organisation have been very passionate about for a while now, alongside my colleagues here. It's obviously been a pretty dire situation over the last 10 or so years with small abattoirs, actually longer than that. The centralisation we've seen with supermarkets obviously came to light in COVID, where suddenly this very well-oiled system fell apart within a day and a half, when you couldn't get the milk from the dairies that used to go to the cafes into the supermarkets for people to buy. And I think it just really highlighted the fragility of the centralised system we've created. And of course, during that time, veg box schemes popped up, cheese box schemes, meat box schemes. I think we've probably gone backwards a little bit since then again, but I think it did show that there could be a demand from the general public for more local food, and people wanting to know the story behind their food, and particularly with meat and animal products, wanting to know that those things came from a good place. So because of a few factors, we've seen massive decline in the number of small abattoirs across the UK, but it's actually a trend that's happening all over the world as well. So there was a 40% loss of small abattoirs since 2007, and a report done by National Craft Butchers found that 59% of small abattoir owners expected to go out of business if there was no support from government over the next 5 or so years. So really scary, actually. And I know a lot of you in the audience will be farmers, and so know firsthand how horrible it is actually to have to drive a very long way to a very big abattoir, and actually how much nicer it is to have a small abattoir owner down the road that you know and trust, and you can go and pick up your carcass and know that that's exactly your one, and then sell it to your customers or sell it to your butcher or supermarket. So there's a few reasons why this decline has happened. I think there's a big issue around lack of skills, succession planning. Many abattoir owners, frankly, are kind of getting older, and it's obviously not a very sexy industry to come into. I think it is actually pretty sexy, but the fact that there's very little business case at the moment around running a small abattoir makes it very difficult for young people to enter into the industry. So we're going to talk a bit about that today. But the really big one is regulation. The regulation is in no way proportionate to the size of the abattoir. So the tiny abattoirs have to comply with the same regulation as the big abattoirs. That's a really big barrier. And there's a lot of cost involved with that regulation, which makes things very difficult. So for those 3 reasons and many more, it's becoming really difficult for small abattoirs. But there is hope. We have some really good news that has come from government over the last 6 months or so, particularly in the last few weeks, which John is going to share a bit more information on. So I really hope today that we can express to you the difficulties small abattoir owners are facing, but I think the hope on the horizon for not just stopping abattoirs from closing, but potentially allowing new ones to open up, which is super exciting. So just to quickly introduce my panel, we have Andy Gray, who is a regenerative farmer, slaughterman, butcher, many things, as well as being very central to the mobile abattoir, which some of you may have seen at Groundswell last year. John Mettrick from the National Craft Butchers, and runs an abattoir himself, very key person in this industry. Robyn here from the Isle of Wight, who is an NFU county chair, but also an independent consultant and facilitator, and is working to hopefully set up a new abattoir on the Isle of Wight. And Jonty, Brunyee, who's an agroecologist and farmer, and again, expert in this space and hopefully also setting up an abattoir. So, lots of hope on this panel. But John, I want to come to you first, if that's all right. And can you just give a bit of a summary of where we are and some of these new funds on the horizon that Defra are introducing?
Certainly. Where we are at the moment is probably about 65 small abattoirs left in the UK. And this number does vary a bit because some are closing and then being bought out. And that means that they're doing under 1,000 livestock units per annum. 1,000 livestock units, just you understand, it could be one beast, 20 sheep, and 6 pigs, and it's a combination of those that makes up the livestock units. The abattoirs really are struggling, as Adele's already alluded to, under the disproportionate regulations, not risk-based at all, just rule-based and based really on what export abattoirs have to contend with. So you can imagine you can have like a vet stood there all day looking at 10 cattle, or he can be stood in a small abattoir, or he can be in a large abattoir watching, a couple of thousand cattle. Yeah, but the regulations are the same. The economics of running an abattoir as well, they're very difficult, small abattoir, because of the economies of scale, and I can link into that with the removal of animal byproducts and the fact that that's a hefty charge now, which was an income, and I'll allude to that later on when we do another presentation on hides and skins. Succession, as Adele said, people are getting older, they're looking for people to come into the trade. And obviously because they've been under the cosh for so long, that's a real challenge. So those are the problems we've got at the moment. And the Abattoir Sector Group, which has been set up a few years now, has been working extremely hard to try and alleviate some of these things. So with regard to regulation, we've managed to get the bureaucracy reduced to make the paperwork more simple for small business. That's one of the major things we've done. We're also pushing for the 5% rule, which will mean that veterinary attendance in abattoirs doesn't need to be as onerous as it is at the moment, and that could push the 1,000 livestock unit limit up for full veterinary attendance up to over 2,000 units, which will mean a more efficient use of veterinary time and make it easier for the small abattoirs as well. We're also pushing for the over 30-month rule to be relaxed. We want that to go to 36 months so that farmers and abattoirs won't have to cope with the extra costs of vertebral column removal, and we see that would fit in with native breeds without taking a risk. So that's what we're pushing as well. But the two things that have been the major achievements are these two funds. So you've got the Small Abattoir Fund, which is for existing small abattoirs, and that is linked to productivity. It's linked to animal welfare. So if you can show that you're going to increase productivity or you're going to improve your animal welfare, and that's above the statutory legal requirement, then there's a grant available for that. We've managed through the Abattoir Sector Group to get that up to a rate of 50% now. It was 40%, although we advised Defra that wasn't enough for the small businesses. We've got it to 50% now, and so that's an improvement. So if you needed a new set of stunners, or you needed to, for instance, buy some equipment to make burgers to add value, because that's the difference between small abattoirs and big ones. Small abattoirs add value, big abattoirs are about throughput, and they add value in terms of for the farmers and for the retail businesses that they're concerned with. And then so that's a fund of £4 million, maximum grant 75,000, and we've also pushed for that system of actually applying for that grant to be as simple and as business friendly as possible, so that you don't need to employ a consultant to get it. We've also, the Prime Minister has announced under the Farm Investment Fund 3 million, and again there's going to be some, we're led to believe, some preferential treatment towards people who are wanting to open new abattoirs. That's the new abattoir fund, and that's available hopefully through Defra. In the next few months you'll be able to apply for that, and that's really to fill the holes for those areas that have been devoid of abattoir provision and where you can actually prove a case that there is a need for one. So that's a very quick run through. I hope I'm on time with that.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
So obviously we're just over a week away from a general election, and there's going to be a lot of Defra bashing at this event, I imagine, for good reason. But actually on this issue, particularly John Powell, who was meant to be on this panel here today but couldn't be here, obviously could have heard her, unfortunately. But John in particular and his team have been really helpful, so a quick shout out to them. Really appreciate that. What's your one ask of an incoming government, John?
Legislative change. We keep hearing from Defra all about flexibilities within the regulations. They've been done to death. There aren't any more. So that's a red herring. What we actually need is legislative change so that the Food Standards Agency can actually apply risk-based, proportional regulation that ensures the safety of food, but it also ensures that you don't have to be a large business to be in the abattoir sector. And that's our first ask, and that's the most important ask. We need to create an environment where people want to be in this industry, and young people can see a future in running a business where they can run a small abattoir, perhaps along with a retail offering, and offer services to farmers so that they can actually have back the meat that they produce, and they can actually identify it, and sell it directly to the public. We desperately need that legislative change.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We've got, we've come so far with government over the last few months, and we really need to make sure that carries over into the next administration.
I was going to say the thing is the actual even the definition of what an official veterinarian does, would be helpful. We've got vets that on the regulations at the moment have to be present. There's no use of technology. We can't do anything remotely. You've got people in Scotland, like the Isle of Mull, who are having vets travelling on ferries, and they have to kill on certain days, to tie in with the vets and everything. We're not making full use of technology, and I think, if technology could be used, you could have a vet there doing remote inspection. And then what we also need to do is an extra safeguard is upskill the abattoir workers. We've already got a regulation that means that if you're over 1,000 units or whatever, you have to have somebody qualified as an animal welfare officer. I think we should make that right the way across the board, that has to be somebody qualified as an animal welfare officer. They can then actually, if they have a problem, they can actually isolate an animal or isolate a carcass until a vet comes to look at it if they think there's a problem. The risks here are very, very low, but the expense is very, very great. And particularly in terms of stress, we mothballed our abattoir because of a situation that happened with an OV who was inexperienced in the field, who misinterpreted the regulations, and we lost our slaughterman as a direct result of that, because he was a young man, it just sickened him, didn't want to work in the industry anymore, because somebody was actually inexperienced telling him how he should do his job, and basically suspended him, straight away, again, against the regulations, and he thought, I don't want to be in this anymore. And this is a consequence of scraping about, trying to find OVs from all over the world to come in and inspect, to actually fulfill this regulation, when in fact it would be better if the vet could delegate more responsibilities to the food business operator or to meat inspectors, meat hygiene inspectors, who would be better placed. That would be a much better scenario than bringing inexperienced people in just to fulfill a regulatory requirement. And that's a big issue.
Thank you, John. So, Andy, I'm going to come to you next, if that's all right. You've been absolutely central in helping roll out the mobile abattoir, which was developed by Jane Parker over at Fur Farm, who is the chair of our board. It has its challenges, but it also has its opportunities. So can you just share with us a little bit about that and the journey you've been on?
Sure. So Lady Jane Parker very bravely brought in this mobile slaughter unit, which hadn't really been seen before, or we now call it a movable one, because it's actually quite difficult to be, it's not quick on its feet. You have to spend quite a lot of time putting it together. And what it's done really is given us the opportunity to shake up the way we think of the whole process, and it became quite a useful lever when it came to talking to Defra, and we've effectively, by having it here, we've established the fact that you can actually do this. You can actually have a mobile unit or a movable unit which goes from hub to hub and stays in one place for a while. Once you're on these journeys, then you start to discover the bottlenecks and the difficulties in achieving what you're trying to achieve, and actually the opportunities and all the positives as well. So we're catering butchers. We've had this unit for about 18 months, I guess, and we've run it on and off. It allows us to take beautiful livestock from Devon, which is one of the great, livestock producing places in Europe, and shorten the supply chain. But all our farmers they just won't stop phoning up saying, "Is it back? Can we use it?" And everybody just loves the fact it's there. So it's an enormously positive thing to have it there. It also has sort of focused the conversation around this. So people are becoming, suddenly it's a sort of beacon of hope when it comes to a change of legislation and a different type of opportunity. And I think, the most key lesson we've discovered from it really is it gives people the opportunity to work out if a slaughterhouse is something they can actually have and use before they invest in bricks and mortar buildings and commit themselves to too much capital expense. So because you bump into, can you get the slaughterman? Can you organise the vet? Have you actually got that demand? Can you establish a need which can then lead to to increasing the likelihood of getting planning permission? Is it for you anyway? The whole the regulations around slaughter are so Kafkaesque that that's enough to put some people off. So it's a great low risk opportunity to do this. And on top of that, the islands we have around us, Robyn's here, so I mustn't take too much of her thunder, but I'm working with the Scilly Isles at the moment, who've been wanting to have a slaughter unit for 20 years, and it's never really been a good way to approach it, but this potentially is a very good way to approach it. We can put basically a modular unit in there, and they can work out whether or not, there is an appetite on the Scillies to train up people who are competent in slaughter. But the question is, can we get the vet there? What does that look like, and all that sort of thing. So it's a low risk opportunity to sort of flirt with slaughter, basically. But I think just as importantly, it's just sort of shaken up the whole legislative structure. And I would say that, as Adele says, John Powell and his team have been pretty spectacularly helpful on all of this stuff. They are distinct from the FSA, who are find it much more difficult to change. But there has been within that Defra team a real appetite to help us to move this whole agenda forward, because there is a recognition we are in a really difficult spot when it comes to slaughter. And I think that one of the key things that people forget is, as we get more and more consolidated businesses, we need startups to be coming up underneath them as challenger businesses. So we need businesses which just slaughter anyway, just doing it on the doorstep, but we also need that opportunity for new companies to start, rather than sort of pan-European mega companies to just come in and buy our existing slaughter up. Not that I'm picking on anybody particular, but you know what I'm saying is basically it's a bit of local industry restarting again would be a good thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. And how would the new funds, either the existing Abattoir Fund or the new Abattoir Fund, help you or people like you? What opportunities does it provide?
We've applied for extra skinning equipment. So, from the point of view of a fund which helps you buy extra equipment, one, it produces efficiencies within the system to improve your business model. Regardless, in theory, it's not there to improve your hygiene, but the reality is, if you're improving your process, you're going to improve your hygiene anyway, which is likely to reduce the vexatious interaction that you have with your official veterinary surgeon. So we, as I say, we've applied for skinning equipment, which will speed us up, but also reduce the level of contamination getting onto that carcass. So in that case, that's a great value. I think we're in an industry which is pretty difficult to make money for reinvestment, and anything which helps you reinvest in your business has got to be a good thing. So that has high value. From the point of view of the startup grant funding, an awful lot of our buildings and infrastructure is old and knackered, and there's a lot of better, new, innovative materials coming through, and you can rethink your layout. And actually, there is an appetite out there. We are finding people coming to us all the time in the Abattoir sector group saying, we really want to do this. If just a few of those people can get this funding and start up, well, we've solved a problem for farmers in parts of Britain where there is, or England at the moment, England and Wales is it, where where there is a socking great hole in the availability for slaughter, and livestock's either having to go to somewhere you can't get your fifth quarter back, you can't get your liver and things like that back from, and you've lost that circular economy, which really Groundswell is all about. So if we can just open a few more, then we might just get that optimism back into the whole job, and others will follow.
Thank you, Andy. Well, that's a very nice segue to Robyn, who is embarking on the admirable, but I imagine pretty scary journey of opening up a new abattoir on the Isle of Wight. So can you just share with us your journey so far?
Questionable, definitely. Sanity at times. So the Isle of Wight, I'm sure most of you will know, off the south coast from Southampton and Portsmouth. So we haven't had an abattoir on the island since 1987, when the facility closed due to a significant amount of investment needed and not felt to be sustainable. We have been looking at this. I mean, this has gone around a few times, but I think it's interesting to find that at the moment it's never felt more palatable. There's never been more interest, and an awful lot of that is being driven by points that have been made around the circular economy and the drive and interest for local purchasing of meat. So we've seen a real uplift in an interest in local food culture and that circular economy and wanting to add value to island produce, but that is being stymied at the moment, and the growth of any of those businesses being hindered by the access to slaughter. So at the moment, anybody that wants to retail their own meat on the island or sell into the hospitality trade has to book their slot on the fortnightly lorry to get it away to mainland for slaughter and then get their carcass back. And that really erodes the story that these businesses are building, because they've lost that point of contact. They can't get the fifth quarter back. It makes it much more difficult, and sometimes just actually access can be a problem. We now only have one haulier. Unfortunately, he suffered a medical episode recently. Didn't have an option for a month. That really hinders the growth of those businesses because they can't build that reliable supply chain. So we've been, the Isle of Wight NFU, having identified with our members that this was becoming a more and more significant issue. The abattoirs that we use on the mainland also, you worry about their future. We've been seeing abattoirs closing all the time. These are small abattoirs. What future have they got? We want to be able to control our story better. We want the security to allow these businesses to grow and to build. So we've been working with our members to look at how to do that over the last couple of years. We've done a lot of work, with fantastic support from the Sustainable Food Trust. A lot of work with Jane Parker around the movable unit, because as sort of talked about, one of our real difficulties that we find is being able to judge the throughput and the demand, because you could base it on what goes off on a lorry on a fortnightly basis, but we know that there is more demand there and we want more growth. So the opportunity for us to look at doing a phased approach to this, by initially putting in the lairage and the chilled units in a modular sense, and being able to slot in, as so we would be a hub, is the ideal. We would be one of the hubs for a movable unit, will allow us to test that. Because I think where we've seen issues talking to other islands in the past, is that you build a facility in the hope that it's right. Well, you either build too small or you build too big and it falls over. And that we just don't want that. We want to make sure that what we build is right, that it's sustainable, and that it will be a long-term solution for the island. So the opportunity that the movable unit has provided to do that has been fantastic. And then hopefully that will allow us over the coming years to look at putting in a more fixed permanent unit. And so the opportunity of funding through being able to buy equipment to support that initial phase, and then being able to look at the longer term options for a permanent unit would be fantastic. So it would be really, really positive. I say John Powell again has been great. Our local MP has been really supportive in trying to get this to move forward. But long-term commitment from the government for us to see this investment is what's really key, because there isn't a lot of margin in this. When we're looking at the figures, it's not going to save farmers anything having an abattoir on the island, because there's going to be different costs to it. But it will add so much value to their produce and to their product.
Thanks, Robyn. And it's brilliant that you're seeing this demand from farmers, which perhaps wasn't obvious before. Do you also have the same demand for people who might want to work in the facility, or perhaps set up businesses connected to the facility, like local butchers and that sort of thing? Are you seeing that?
Well, I mean, we've got good relationships with, so what happens at the moment is the whole carcasses come back. So all the processing is done on the island. So if you've actually got great capacity on the island for the processing side, and a real appetite from those butchers wanting to sell a local product, but they can't consistently get that product. So it just undermines the story constantly. But I mean, our feeling is that, you know, we are a defined geography as an island. We've got, islands have different issues, but actually if we can make it work as a hub, we can make that local abattoir story work. It can be replicable in lots of other places.
Absolutely. And are you talking to the other islands who are figuring out the same issues as well?
Yeah, well, hopefully, I think we've got a call at the end of this week, which should be very interesting and very exciting. And I think what's been fantastic about the group that you've run as the Abattoir Sector Group and the opportunity it's given us to talk to each other is to learn from each other, because our paths are all slightly different. We all face slightly different challenges, but ultimately, so much of the legislation is the same hurdle. And particularly as islands, we all face similar issues. So I'm really hopeful that by coming together, we can learn from each other and build out from there.
Brilliant, thank you. So, Jonty, you are in a similar but different position, trying to save an abattoir that might be closing down. So can you just tell us a bit? I know some of you might be aware of this story, but I think it's really interesting where it's got to now.
Thanks, Adele. Hands up, who uses Long Compton Abattoir, who used to use? Just see who's in the room. Okay, there's a few. So I work for the North East Cotswold Farmer Cluster Group, and I think this is the first really important lesson. We've come together as a group of farmers at landscape scale to tackle some of these issues. So we've got about 120 farmers in the group, covering about 60,000 hectares. Think Clarkson, that's where we are, that valley there, right? We're looking at the red meat supply chain in general, not just one abattoir issue. We've got 3 or 4 abattoirs around us. They're all going to be gone in the next 5 years if we're not careful. So take a step back, look at what's around you. We're looking at supply, we're looking at landscape restoration, we're looking at routes to market. The Oxford colleges want our beef and lamb, but we haven't got a wholesale supply chain to get it into Oxford. We're looking at venison. So we've just done a drone survey of all the deer in the cluster group and trying to work out how to get that into our abattoirs. Looking at all the cutting plants. There's unused cutting plants in the district. Farmers with white rooms left, right and centre not being utilised properly. So I think, again, there's latent demand to do more and more and more. And then Long Compton closed at Christmas quite quickly. It's about a 3-acre site. It's got planning potential for houses, but the council are not keen on that idea. They want to see it kept as an abattoir. So we came together as a group of farmers, a steering group, volunteers, a community-led thing, round a kitchen table to say, what should we do? Let's try and save the abattoir. Save Long Compton Abattoir campaign. So a bit of social media, a few emails, got it out there. And within 3 weeks, we'd got about 300 people willing to invest in saving the abattoir. And only about a third of those were farmers. It was users, or eaters of food. It was people in London who've never been out to the Cotswolds, never been onto a farm. We had money from America. People just saying, we'd like to support you. This is really important. And people are trying to support us, not just because of animal welfare. It's because of landscape restoration. It's because of soil build. It's because of traditional and rare breeds. It's because they want to support the pasture-fed movement and organic farming and horned cattle. It's all those things, so don't forget that. It's not just about welfare and getting some meat and some added value. It's a big, wide thing. So we've got now about 450 potential investors. So we did an expression of interest form, which I think was semi-illegal, apparently, because it's like nearly doing a share offer through the back door. So you need to take a bit of advice if you're going to do that.
No, I think take Joel Salatin's advice of what's his book called, Everything I Want to Do is Illegal. Whatever.
Yeah. We've written a business plan which has shown that at half capacity that abattoir is viable financially. So it can stack up. We've got a mortgage from Oxbury Bank. They've been really supportive. So we're now we're not there yet, we're now just trying to refine the final offer, the bidding, the value of the site, and hopefully we can buy it in the next, I'm going to say 2 or 3 weeks. It's not there yet. If we don't reach a final figure, we will pull out. We know what it's kind of worth, what we can afford. And if we don't buy it, we're going to build a new one. We're looking at 3 greenfield sites right now. And my vision, and Rich Summers' vision, is the best abattoir in the country with a butchery and adding value academy. If you can't do it in the Cotswolds, you can't do it anywhere. We want white label produce. We need a wholesale chain. We need training and skills, farm shop. the best thing we can do, and really work on the added value thing. And the farmers want it. But we'll see. If we can save Long Compton first, it's fit for purpose. We hope to open this side of Christmas if we buy it.
So I've got two questions, Jonty. Do you think the kind of multi-investor, multi-shareholder approach is something that others could replicate, or do you think it's kind of too complicated? I know you're in a unique situation, but
no, I don't think it's overly complicated. Share offers and community buyouts happen elsewhere across industry. We just need to do it a little bit more in farming and come together. It needs directors, it needs good governance. We've set up a limited company, a holding company to buy the whole site, and then an abattoir company to run the abattoir, just to spread risk and the income streams. So it can be done. It takes a lot of volunteer time and effort, and what I'd love to see is more government support for that process. We need a grant to save abattoirs, a bit of money up front to get things moving, not just to buy kit. I've spoken to all our local abattoirs and they said, you know what, the grant ain't going to save us. It's useful to buy some shiny stuff. What we need is skills, labour, governance, regulation change, and planning support, maybe to move. Why don't we build a brand new spanker at the livestock market where we've got concrete, lairage and no housing next door?
So to your point on skills and the fact that if you can't do it in the Cotswolds, where can you? There's obviously a fair few colleges around you. What's your plans to involve students and start bringing them back into this industry?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is we've got one or two farmers and others that want to train up, and they might train as a butcher, added valuer, maybe a slaughterman within that. So yes, utilise the resource already you have. And then we've got places like Witney and Abingdon College that want to run apprenticeships, etc. So we need to link that together. And then we need to pay people fairly, right? This is not an easy job. It's an old abattoir. It's not a lovely line abattoir. You need to be multi-skilled. You're going to kill on one day. You're going to cut the next. You're going to serve customers on Friday, Saturday. And you need those type of people. But you need to pay them well, train them well, and give them time off. All the abattoir owners I've spoken to said, I work 51 weeks a year and I've done it since I was 15 and no one else knows where the keys to the biscuits are.
Well, I think we should open it up to questions. I know many of you in the audience probably have experiences or of course, questions for the panel. So we've got a roving mic. If you could put your hand up, say who you are, ask your question. Ideally, keep it a question unless you've got something specific to add, and say who you want to direct the question to. So here in the middle.
It's a question for John, really. So we're helping a young lad that's set up a mobile home kill slaughter business. So he does mostly casualties or for smallholders that want to eat their own meat, or cattle that haven't got a passport. And he's been told by the government that he can't get any funding because it's not going into the human food chain, even though people are eating themselves. So if you could get that message back, that it just seems crazy that somebody's setting up a new business, doing really well, but can't get any help at all.
Right, it's a difficult one, this, because obviously as a small abattoir, we've already alluded to the fact that you have to invest a lot of money, in equipment, to fit all the regulations, and obviously that's a lot higher standard of regulation than it is if you're actually having something killed on farm and eating it yourself. Yeah, it's one of those things that sometimes sticks in small abattoirs' craws, where businesses like that can go and kill, and hopefully it would never enter the food chain in the pub down the road or be given to Grandad or anybody else, because it shouldn't be. But does that actually happen? So it's an awkward one, because obviously it's an important service that's providing, but it's not a service. It's a service for that particular family, that particular farm. Whereas obviously small abattoir is we service 200 farmers. A big customer base, all those people. And I suppose the question back is, why should I invest, a hell of a lot of money, in all the equipment, fitting through all the regulations, if somebody can just go to a farm, kill something, and then sell it to everybody? And obviously from the point of view of traceability as well, the idea of having a small abattoir where as a farmer you can take your produce and basically have it made into a value-added product so you can make a profit as a farmer, the slaughterhouse can make a profit, and you know that it fits all the health and safety and food hygiene regulations is really, really important. And I'm sure that the business that you're talking about is a bona fide business, he's doing it all right, but you have to also equate in legislation for the worst case scenario where somebody might not be doing that. So that's the situation as I see it. I would like to see him supported in some way, but I think there needs to be obviously very careful constraints to make sure that they are just supplying the farmer and it's not finding itself into the wider food chain, because that could create all kinds of problems to do with food safety, which would reflect back on everybody.
Yeah,
and
it's impossible to get a vet and a food safety person for doing like one animal or two animals, isn't it?
Yes, I mean the thing is, for abattoirs to be viable, just to enlarge on this a bit, I think a small abattoir, the ideal situation is more or less what Jonty said, in which our business has been going for over 100 years. And basically, you've got a retail outlet where you're processing local animals for the local people, you know, and the catering and whatever. And if you're in a specific area, like we're in the Peak District, High Peak lamb is a big seller for us. You know, we've got something there to hang our hat on, and then basically you provide services on top of that for farmers, and farmers will come to a small abattoir where there's a price dip in a particular species. Nobody be taking very many lambs in at 10-20 a kilo dead weight at the moment, but if the price was £5 a kilo, you might find they'd be knocking on the door of the small abattoir to say, can you cut this up and make it into half lambs for me? So you usually find that there's some imbalance, you know what I mean, in the pricing of livestock somewhere, that farmers need small abattoirs to help them generate a better income from. So you hang your hat on the retail and the actual selling direct to the customer bit, and then you take the additional business from farmers who might be struggling with the price, so that both the farmer benefits and the abattoir benefits. So that's what I see as an ideal scenario, and I think that stood us in good stead for 100 years, you know. And I think that go with the people being more interested in where the food comes from, and that I think that is the way to go forward.
Thanks, John. A question over here.
Again, directed to John. You clearly stated that legislative change needs to happen. Now, I'm sure we're going to go to presentations today, and there's going to be lots of other people saying legislative change needs to happen elsewhere in the farming industry. How high of a priority do you think this is, and is it actually regarded as a priority within government, do you feel, or is it just something that's on the back burner and not really bothered about, in your opinion?
I think the regulation change is the most important thing. That is what the small abattoir sector is going to be dependent on for its future, and that is the most important thing. And we've obviously, when we came out of the EU with Brexit, the regulations were transposed over from the EU to UK law, and those regulations have not been changed. They're still the same. In fact, the regulations in Europe, if we were still in, would be more beneficial now to small abattoirs than the ones we've actually got. And that's the crazy situation that we're in. So we need to keep the pressure upon government for that legislative change, because the Food Standards Agency, you know, have got their hands tied with the regulations as they are at the moment. And you know, we really need to push that. I think somebody said to me in the civil service that basically with Brexit it was like a house where you've got the parents and the children, and when we left the EU, the parents left and the children were left running about not knowing what to do. Yeah, and I think that analogy, I like that analogy, but I would say that time has gone past now and those children have actually grown up, and it's about time we actually legislated for ourselves, you know, and sensibly and proportionately, you know, to give this small abattoir sector a chance.
Yeah, absolutely.
just to follow on to that, I do think we've seen with my work with the NFU, we have seen a significant shift in government attitude. And I mean, the Labour manifesto features food security as being a priority. So I do, our conversations and the progress that's been made just in the last 6 months, even with the change of government, the civil servants that have been working on this, they're still going to be there, and all the work that's been done to date by the Abattoir sector group, by other organisations, will still be a foundation for that. So I feel really positive about the position that we're in for this kind of conversation now, and government recognising the importance of small abattoirs as a really crucial part of the network that keeps food in the supply chain from local sources.
Yeah, absolutely, Robyn. As you say, that Labour's actually made a pledge to, I think it's quite an ambitious pledge, to reach 50% local food procurement. I don't quite know if there's a deadline, but 50% local food procurement. I mean, wow, that's pretty major. I think it is ambitious, but they can't do that without small abattoirs and pack houses. So I think it's really key. But we do have a huge job to do to keep this on the agenda. So the Abattoir sector group, just to say, which John chairs and everyone's involved in. My colleague Megan Perry, who's somewhere, is key to coordinating it. She's the real expert in our team. It's pretty much a voluntary group, and everyone has been putting in so much time to do this and get to where we are. But if anyone feels able to support the work of the group, that would be amazing, because we've gone so far, but we just don't want to fall back down now. Question here, and then we'll come to the front. Actually, do you want to you do your question first, and then we'll go there and take two.
John alluded to it earlier, the 30 and 36 month rule that's in place for cattle. I'm curious if the speakers think that's outdated, and if you see there's a change for that in the future. My context is I breed my own cattle and we direct sell that meat also. A really big part of my business is the cull cows and the older animals, and over 36 months. But I can't take them all the way through the chain and direct sell that meat when that's probably the key for my farm, but it's not gone all the way through.
Before you answer, we'll just take that question. Is there any other questions? One over here as well, and then we'll.
My question is pretty similar. We do accidentally and that over 26 months. I mean, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe Andy and John, if you want to answer that one, and then we'll come to these two here.
Right, okay. So basically, we're trying to get it to 36 months as a step to gradually increasing, the age of the animal, to get up to 48 months, and beyond. But the problem is that we keep having these cases, that would never have got in the food chain, but necessarily are BSE related. And we've had them in Scotland, we've had them in Somerset, and I've talked to the Defra people who've almost been on the verge of going to the World Health Organization, getting us BSE risk-free status, and the day before we get a case, and that effectively knocks it back. There is some talk about the definition, of how that's interpreted, where it's all to do with the age of the animals, all to do with the feed, when the food could have gone into the animal's feed, all that kind of thing is coming in. But Defra are working on it. I feel so sorry for the team there, because they're all geared up, ready to go, and then the rug is pulled. And so it's an ongoing situation where we're keeping the pressure on, and the idea of asking for over 30 to go to 30 from 30 months to 36 is really to start bringing the native breed animals in that can be finished, take away that cost of the VC removal, not end up with these wobbly carcasses that have had the backbone removed, and you've got the buttock hanging with a misshaped sirloin on it, and actually try and get rid of that, and obviously we can trying to prove the scientific case, and Defra got a whole team working on it, trying to prove that it's not necessary in those age of animals to remove that vertebral column.
Thanks. Come over here, and then we'll go to the lady in pink here at the front.
Thanks so much, everyone. It's been really interesting. I'm a journalist, and I'm interested in corporate consolidation and the way that affects growing and farm finances. And I was wondering, Andy, you referenced this as an issue. I was wondering, from the people who are keen to use the mobile slaughterhouse, what would they otherwise? Where would they otherwise be selling? Would they be selling to one of the big slaughterhouses, or would they be travelling a long way to another small slaughterhouse? What's the kind of mixture?
I think it's entirely down to where they are in the country, really. I mean, I'm in mid-Devon, and we do have, within an hour's journey, 3, if not 4, smallish units which can do it. But having said that, quite a lot go off to Dawn Meats in Haverley, where it is consolidated, and you can't get your stuff back from there. So there are parts of the country you have no choice, and that's the real big issue. And actually, I'm fortunate from my point of view. I'm just in a sweet spot between all the others where it's the right distance. But people, this is what farmers want. They don't want to be driving an hour. They prefer to drive 10 minutes, and there is no excuse not to aspire to have that density of small slaughterhouses where they can travel a much shorter distance. The need is there, the desire is there. It's just that, as predominantly, it's been, I've been in the slaughter trade for 35 years, and in that time, the legislative burden has just been, as John says, disproportionate and shut it down. And unfortunately, all forms of legislation will always favour the consolidated businesses for bigger businesses because they have a department to deal with it. The guy that cuts a bullock's throat isn't necessarily the same bloke who wants to fill in the forms. And when you're a 1, 2, 3-man band, then heavy-duty legislation will work against you. In the same way, incidentally, as certification schemes and things like that, they can work against you as well. So I think we have to be careful how we approach the whole ecosystem around our food system, because we get unintended consequences from what seemed like a really good idea at the time.
Thanks, Andy. Robyn, do you want to answer and go
Yeah,
to
I was just
the
going to say the importance of choice. So for us on the island, the issue that we have is a lot of businesses don't have choice. As well as the work that I do, my father is a sheep farmer. We established the farmers market on the island as one of the core members of that. We used to run a box scheme, but it just got to the point that it was so difficult to juggle that we've ended up going completely back into the commodity sector because it becomes really too difficult and too risky. But actually, ironically, if we had access to an abattoir, that would allow us to spread risk in our business because we'd have choice, and that's really, really important for particularly family farm businesses, and having that tapestry of network allows access to that market.
And actually, the market doesn't work if you're only selling to 1 or 2 people. You've got to have multiple buyers to actually have a market. So the market just isn't functioning anymore.
Hi, sorry to sort of jump back to the last question, but it was around that 30-month rule. I'm sort of very naive, only got into livestock farming the last sort of 4 or 5 years, but we were looking at doing some home-produced beef. And I was wondering if we've got time, you could slightly just touch on the legislation, because I was aware of the 30-month rule. I was ringing around some local abattoirs and found someone that would cut for us if it was under 6 years, but they wouldn't kill there on site. So if you had 2 minutes to sort of just touch on that.
But basically, you have to be licensed for vertebral column removal. So whichever business that if you're going over 30 months, then you need to find a slaughter, and preferably with an attached cutting room that has a license for the removal of a vertebral column. So that's what you need to find, is a business that will do that for you. There might be you can actually have it, we do over 30 months, and basically, because we're mothballed at the minute, hoping to open again soon, but we have the over 30 months killed at one abattoir and then brought to our cutting room because we have a VC removal license. So that means the vet has to come to site and actually see that the vertebral column is removed, stained, and disposed of, and wants to see obviously all the paperwork trail to make sure that it's been incinerated and that. So that's really what happens. So that's what you need to look for. I think if you approach the abattoir sector group, we could do that digging around for you. So craft butchers, I don't think Defra and the FSA will, because they'll see that preferential treatment, to a particular abattoir or whatever. But if you was to give us your area, then we can have a hunt round and see, and save you perhaps that legwork.
One thing we haven't actually covered is the whole thing around horned animals and rare breeds that aren't easily handled through the bigger people. And going back to Robyn's point on choice, when you've got these smaller units, they're much more likely to fill these niches. In this journey we're all going on with sustainable farming, we need those niches to be filled, and small companies are great at nipping into niches and going, okay, I've got a demand on my doorstep for horned animals or whatever. So I think, and fractious beasts, handling of fractious beasts from rewilding places, either bison or het cattle and things like that. Who the hell's going to do that if it isn't a small slaughterhouse? So choice is, we've been lectured for a whole generation on how important choice is, whilst having it taken away from us.
Thank you. So we're coming towards the end of the time, but everyone's going to stick around. So if you've got questions, please stay to ask them. I'm going to ask each of you. So you're sitting in front of the Prime Minister a week on Monday. This is clearly going to be the first thing that he is going to get to on the first day of the new job. So what's your ask, Jonty?
You devil. Yeah, I think we need that. We put billions into saving banks, right, and bailing the banks out. I think we need that slush fund to bail out abattoirs and all farming infrastructure businesses, mills, creameries, etc. We need it all. So an infrastructure saving grant.
Just to provide the industry with some confidence, I think we need to stop flip-flopping between different priorities, which is what we've had for the last few years, and just have some clarity in a long-term plan, not just a grant that's going to be open for 3 months and then we'll see what comes, but a long-term vision for what this looks like to support our sector.
Legislative change. We knew you knew I was going to say that, didn't you? I'll keep harping on, but we've done a fantastic job so far. That we've got a grant, we've got Defra working with us, we've got all those things all positive. And I've been doing this 30 years. I've seen lots of Defra people and been to lots of committees, and some people have retired who are my compatriots. But there's never been a more positive time, because this is the first time we've had specific funds for abattoirs that I can remember that wasn't competitive with other areas. So get that legislative change, make it risk-based and proportionate to give these small businesses a chance. Look at it in detail, a common sense approach. Let's make better use of our official veterinarians. You don't study for 7 years to count animals, yeah? So, that, and they've got, there's 33% of those vets leaving all the time, and no wonder, because they're not getting the job satisfaction. Put more responsibility on the food business operator. Use some of more of the meat hygiene inspectors, yeah? Use the tools. The tools are all there. All you need to do is adapt that legislation to make use of them. And then it will give this sector the confidence to go on into the future. Because I'm sure small abattoirs do have a future. And it's not necessarily financial, it's all about having the environment where people want to be in that sector and take pride in turning an animal off a farm into great food that we know where it comes from and that's great to eat.
Other than legislative change, I think actually a government task force within who truly understand all the nuances and the bottlenecks and just how complex the problems are that we're trying to deal with, and can actually work through the whole of government, working out how to change the legislative ecosystem to allow us to function more effectively. But at the same time, we are, if you're a startup, you're trying to reinvent a wheel which everybody's already got. So we should be looking at cookie cutter HACCPs and procedures and policies and things like that, which we all have to adhere to, but to start from the very beginning. And also, just a more intelligent approach to the design and layout of slaughterhouses in each context where they're actually needed.
Thank you all. And I guess just to finish, I want to really stress how much of an opportunity this is right now. It sounds kind of mad, but if those two funds aren't taken up, they're not going to be there. So we really need to make use of this as a sector, and Defra have asked us to start collating people who are wanting to save abattoirs, existing abattoirs, but also set up new ones. And I think we can really do this well if we work together. So please come and chat to the panel if you have questions. Also come and have a chat to us at the Sustainable Food Trust store, which is kind of over there opposite the little pen with the rare breed sheep. And talk to us if you're interested in becoming involved in any way. I think this is really exciting. I hope this time next year we can come back and showcase all the new abattoirs that have been set up. But thank you to the panel, and thank you all for coming. Yeah.